Hello, guys. Hello, and welcome to yet another episode of InstaTravelStyle Podcast Series. And today we have with us Nora from Canada. And I would like to share some brief about Nora, from where she belongs, where she started her travel journey. Nora runs a blog named theprofessionalhobo.com. She has published over 116 plus YouTube videos, and she started YouTube vlogging in 2007, and she has been doing tremendous amount of work since the inception of travel vlogging. So she must be a veteran in travel blogging sphere, the landscape. And she stamped her passport with over 60 plus countries. So in her last 13 years she has traveled to 60 plus countries, and she has been a truly inspiration for all of us. Been traveling full time from last 12 years and living a lifestyle of a digital nomad takes a lot of courage. And today we will be discussing her travel experiences, her key learnings of living as a digital nomad, working remotely, and how she converted her 12 years of traveling experience into a successful digital business, or you can say travel business. And so her experiences as a solo female traveler, because she has been to India as well 3 years back. So I would like to giving without doing further ado, I will now pass on the mic to Nora, where she will give us a brief about herself, how she started traveling, and what keeps her passionate about travel. Over to you.
Thank you very much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Thanks.
So I guess the shortest possible version of my story would be that in 2006, I was living in Toronto, Canada. I was running a financial planning practice, and I had this feeling that there was more to life than what I was doing. And I also had a lifelong dream, and that dream was to travel the world, but not just on vacation, like to really, like to crack the code of countries and cultures around the world. And I learned through a couple of trips that I had taken that I thought were long trips. I spent a month in South Africa. That was my last traditional vacation. And I thought that that was long enough, you know, that I could really understand the country from the inside out in a month, which of course was not possible. Mm-hmm. So I realized I was 30, I was turning 30, and I had, you know, probably 30 more years that I would have to work before I could retire and travel long term. And to me, I just thought, I can't do that. I can't put another 30 years into a life that, you know, was rewarding enough, but wasn't my dream. Yeah. So I decided that I would sell everything I owned, which I did, including my business, and that I would just travel on an open-ended ticket. I didn't know if I would just be gone for a few months or a few years. I didn't know if it was something I just needed to get out of my system, or if there was something more to it, but I was just driven to do it. It was my dream. And so I ended up traveling full-time for 12 years. Yeah. And then in 2018, towards the end of the year, I ended up getting a home base in Toronto again, which is where I am right now. This is my apartment here. But pandemics notwithstanding, I tend to travel still for about 6 months of every year.
Yeah. I've seen your blog as well. You're like traveling half a year. So you have planned your all the vacations, like how you will be planning your budgets and all.
Yeah, it's not even all that planned out, really. Although I guess if I were to to be able to boil it down to something, usually my travels are to, at least a long part of my travels every year are to avoid winter, because winter in Canada is, I grew up with it. I don't like it. I know I don't like it. I'm not good with the cold. Okay. Although I might actually try to spend this winter in Canada. So that'll be interesting. It's been more than 15 years since I've experienced winter. So I think I've kind of forgotten how bad it is. So maybe it's time to remind myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Right. So can you just brief about you, like how you got started into travel blogging? Like you have started in way too early, because now the travel vlogging and blogging is like day to day, everyone is getting into this lucrative field. So you have started way too early, to 2008, 2007. So what keeps you motivated? So what are your ideas behind, and how you started like?
Well, you're not wrong. I started way too early. When I started traveling, blogging, the only thing that blogs were basically online journals. They were like
Yeah.
diaries,
Right.
and that was what mine was as well. I started a blog, a travel blog, with the sole intention of being able for my family and friends back home to be able to check in on me and see whatever I was doing, and also to exercise something that I've always enjoyed doing, which is writing. I've written in one form or another all of my life. I enjoy the process of writing. I'd like to think I'm kind of good at it. So this was a way for me to just enjoy the craft of writing and to write and to kind of chronicle my journeys. So that's all the blog was when I started.
Okay.
And because that's all blogging was, the idea of, I mean, words like monetization and digital nomad and location independent did not exist.
Absolutely.
However, shortly into my travels, I realized, I kind of connected some dots in my head that writing on a laptop could equate to income, as in freelance writing. I could actually write for other publications and I could get paid to do so, and that could actually finance my travels going forward. So I spent the first few years of my travels pursuing, developing, and building a freelance writing portfolio and career, and that was really the bread and butter. I still blogged, I still on my own site, I still continued to work on it, but I still never really expected it to do anything. And my income is coming from freelance writing. Now, somewhere around 2009, I think, or 2008, long story, and I won't get into it, but I accidentally started an international NGO in Thailand, and I was accepting donations through my website. And I was also getting international recognition for this project that I had adopted abroad. So that put my website on the map in a whole new way. And suddenly somebody other than my mother was reading it. And it was around that time as well that websites and blogs started to become a little more recognized. And I also, developing a freelance writing career in conjunction with a blog, a website, really ended up being I had no idea how instrumental it would be in putting my blog on the map, by virtue of things like backlinks and various, I am not an SEO girl, not in any way whatsoever. In fact, SEO is turning out to be my downfall in recent years. But it really served me in the beginning. Now, regarding YouTubing and vlogging, in a former life, I used to actually work as I worked in a television station. And so I was working as an associate producer and host, and I've spent a lot of time on and off camera over the years. So I started off, again, YouTube, way before YouTube was anything other than just a place to put silly cat videos. And I was making videos, again, for my family and friends. But mostly they were extremely low quality. They were like glorified slideshows. They were not good. And again, as I got busy with my freelance writing career and my blogging, everything, I found that the creating the videos, although fun, was not. I had to pick and choose what I could spend my time on, because I was also traveling full time. So I wanted to be able to experience the world as well as earn a living and do my work. So I kind of dropped the videos. So I did a bunch of videos early on, and they weren't very good. And then I stopped. And then I came back to it, and I started doing videos again around 2012, and they were a little better for a few years. And then I stopped again, and then I started again in 2017, I think, or yes. And I stopped again. So I was on again, off again. And the problem was I missed the wave. Not that I couldn't pick it up again. I'm sure I could. But I feel like if I really wanted to, I never was able to, or willing perhaps, to dedicate the real time and energy that it takes to really make it as a vlogger. It was always just a project of passion and enjoyment. And it continues to be. So I still post videos to my YouTube channel, and I still really enjoy it. But I don't do it with enough regularity to actually earn a living with it.
The consistency is lacking, but you have a great amount of content available on YouTube. Like 116 videos speaks a volume about you, like your travel experiences. You have said that you have been on and off.
Yeah.
So like
So you can
12,
see the different changes of hairstyle over the years, go from really short to medium to long to short.
yeah, right. Like 60 countries and 5 continents. Like what keeps you motivating for traveling more and more? Like what is the passion behind, like,
So
if you can.
what got me started in traveling full time was this desire to crack the code of the countries, and by that I mean to understand how people live, think, play, shop, eat, work. Because I realized fairly early on, I actually had a defining moment. I was like 9 years old, and I saw a documentary about Europe,
Okay.
and there was, I everything was different. People were speaking a different language. There was different architecture. They were wearing clothes I didn't recognize. And in my 9-year-old self in that moment wanted to know, how do the children play? I wanted to know what games they played. That was all I wanted to know. So as I grew up, that
Yeah.
little seed grew into this desire to understand, now I want to know, how do the adults play? And how do we work? And how do we cook? And how do we eat? What do people talk about around the dinner table? If there
Okay.
is a table, how do people live? And so that was really what drove me. And in terms of how my travels progressed through most of my 12 years of full-time travel, I didn't choose a destination. A destination would choose me. And usually it would choose me in the form of a unique opportunity. That opportunity could be to volunteer or to house sit or to visit somebody I had met in earlier travels. There was always an overlying reason to visit that place, which inevitably unto itself gave me a cultural insight. It gave me an inside track. I wasn't just staying in hotels and hostels and hanging out with other travelers. I was like
Living with
enmeshed in whatever culture I was visiting. Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Now, I will say over the years, that's always been the thread that has kept me traveling and continues to be the thread that keeps me traveling. But I have also found that over the years, motivations can change. So I ultimately, I believe that full-time travel, like really full-time travel, it has a shelf life. I don't think that it's something that you can do forever. Or if it is, you'd have to do it differently than how I did it, which is why I ended up getting a home base. And now that I have a home base, I find that I do now tend to travel a little differently. And part of that is because of my online career. Part of that is because I've seen a lot of places now. So perhaps some of my goals have changed.
Yeah.
Now I'm maybe a little more interested in getting into nature than getting into someone's house. There's lots of different, and it's been actually quite, perhaps when I stopped traveling full time, I think I felt a little bit like I had failed. And only in the years since then have I realized that no, it's an evolution. As with life, our goals, our motivations, our reasons for being, as well as traveling, can change. And my
absolutely.
experience of the world changes with that.
Yeah, right. Got it. So like in your observation, like how the blogging and the vlogging landscape has been changing throughout the years. Like if you compare like 5 years back, 2015, how you do blogging and vlogging, and compare to 2020, like what are the key changes you have observed in the industry, in the blogging landscape?
I'd even go well before 2015 in terms of how the changes, how the landscape has changed. Like I said, when I started in 2006, blogs were online journals.
Yeah.
And then a few years later, they started becoming a little more recognized. So one of the initial humps that I think bloggers had to get over was there was a blogging isn't real. Blogging is just amateur. It's for amateurs. No bloggers are real writers. They're just bloggers. So there was definitely a stigma to overcome initially. Now, somewhere around 2014 was when I started feeling, by that point, my blog had a lot of traction. I was getting a lot of traffic, and monetization options were coming about, and they ranged from sponsorships to display ads to affiliate income. And I was definitely building that and working that, and I was doing interviews all the time. I was definitely kind of a major player, because I was one of the first, right? It wasn't because I did anything right. It was just one of the first. So I was on the leading edge of a trend, and it was just kind of carrying me with it. But around that same time, around 2014, I realized I was on, the leading edge of this wave. But I also felt like it was becoming sophisticated. It was becoming a much more sophisticated industry. SEO and analytics and all these things were now becoming household names and processes that you had to engage in order to basically throw a science into the art of blogging.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was dancing to stay on top of a snowball. I didn't really want to be on it anymore. I mean, for me, the heart of blogging was creative expression. And it had started to become about more than that. It had started to become about doing the right keyword research and writing the right posts to end up on the search results and get traffic that way. And so I started to feel, I feel like I'm in over my head on this one. And I ended up actually putting my blog on the back burner for a few years. I still worked it. I still posted twice a week, and I was, getting 50 emails a day, and I was definitely keeping things going, but really not accelerating the growth of this site because I was doing something else. I was actually apprenticing with a shaman in Peru for that time, and then working as a shaman's assistant in Ecuador. So I had other things to do, but I kept the blog going so I could have some money coming in that would continue to finance my life abroad. Then around 2017, I came back. I finished my work, my apprenticeship and everything. That changed, and I ended up in Asia. And suddenly, I kind of took a real hard look at my blog, and I realized that I'd fallen behind. That in those 3 years, the industry had become huge. And I was like, now I was just getting lost in the shuffle. And I don't mind getting lost in the shuffle if I'm making enough to, it's not about ego for me. Yeah. But it was a realization that my website, the infrastructure that I had built over the last 10 years and the domain authority and all these things, my income should have been 5 times higher. My traffic should have been 5 times higher than what it was. So I realized I'd really let it go. So I spent the next few years really getting serious about it. And to my own detriment, I started too late. I really should have started getting serious about it in 2014. But that's okay. You know what? Life lesson. So I got serious about it. I hired help. And I really was able to do well. And by early 2020, I was having my best year ever. It was great. The first 2 months of 2020 was brilliant. And then the pandemic happened and travel stopped. And I lost half of my traffic in March. And then, just to add insult to injury, I lost another half of my traffic in May with an algorithm update. And that was heartbreaking for me because I'd spent 3 years working the system of SEO to build a site that would be like ironclad, searchable, helpful, everything that Google wanted it to be. And then Google changed the game, as they like to do. Yeah. And I lost another half of my traffic. So, to be perfectly honest, right now, I'm sitting here looking at this going, wow, okay, from a business perspective, I'm not convinced that a website unto itself is a viable business model. I think the industry has been changing constantly since 2007, and it's changing more. And in order to be in this business, you've got to evolve. Yeah. Or get out.
Right. Like, how do you manage your expenses, like travel expenses? And you have also coined a term called financially sustainable travel. Like, if you want to share some insights about that term, like what is the meaning of that term?
Sure, absolutely. So when I'm a former financial planner, right? So I mean, the money girl in me never went away, and I just applied my kind of financial planning expertise to my own travels. So there's a few things that I've always done. The first of which is I track every dollar that I spend. And I do it for me and for my budgeting purposes to see where I'm spending my money, and also to, only when you know where and how you're spending your money do you then have the opportunity to adjust how you're spending it if you so wish to. You might kind of track your expenses for a while and go, wow, I didn't realize I was spending so much money on lattes at Starbucks, as a cliche example. and then, when you realize, when you see it in black and white, then you can change it if you want. So I was always tracking my expenses. And of course, also because I was running a business as a freelance writer and a blogger, I also tracked my income. I had to for my taxes. So then I started realizing over the years, even though the destinations I was visiting were changing a lot and my income was changing a lot, and, like my circumstances were always changing and waving and fluctuating. But I noticed year over year that I was always I was earning enough money to cover all of my expenses. So for me, this is the core element of financially sustainable travel. It's not about budget travel. It's about how much money you earn, how much money you spend, and balancing those two so you can travel for as long as you want. And there's a lot of creative ways to travel. For one of the lessons that I learned on the road was that actually the cost to live on the road and to travel full time for me was less than it ever was to live in one place. Now, part of that was because of the travel choices that I made. And they were choices that were not only financial in nature, but they were also rewarding in nature. As I said a little bit earlier, my destinations would choose me in the form of like a volunteering or a house sitting opportunity. And what those also gave me were free accommodation. Right, and when your accommodation is free, you're going to save. I mean, that's the most expensive part of travel is accommodation.
Right.
And over my travel career, I saved over $100,000 on accommodation expenses.
Awesome. Really good. Yeah. And you have done a few your volunteering experiences as well.
That was what I just talked about, right? So I've volunteered. The first form of free accommodation that I found was volunteering in trade for free accommodation. So it's also called work exchange, and they're not so much humanitarian experiences as they are. I did everything from painting murals to designing marketing plans to landscaping to cleaning to leading eco treks on llamas and chopping wood. I mean, I did a lot of different things in exchange for free accommodation around the world. But I did find that they were amazing, culturally rewarding, fun experiences, but they took a lot of time. You got to put in the hours of volunteering. And when you put in the hours to volunteer every day, plus the hours to work on my online business every day, I eventually started to get really tired. I realized I was like, wow, I'm working between volunteering and working. I was like busy like 60, 70 hours a week, and I wasn't really experiencing my destination. So that was when I discovered house sitting. And that's a great way for digital nomads and remote workers to get free accommodation, to get all the comforts of home. It's just somebody else's home. You get a chance to live, a local life. You would live the way someone who lives at that destination lives because you're in their house. And you take care. It's a service that you are providing because you're taking care of somebody's home and pets and whatever it is that they need done in their absence while they are traveling. So that was also very rewarding. I did that in a variety of countries. And then there are other ways to get free accommodation, living on boats and hospitality exchanges. I actually wrote a book about it. It's called How to Get Free Accommodation Around the World for the Cost of a Cheeseburger. You'll learn all of my secrets, and it's in its 3rd edition now. So it's it's very popular.
Awesome. And does language comes as a barrier when you go to these kind of culture exchanges to other countries? Like, do you have to learn the local language, or does language is a barrier when you?
It depends on the country. Obviously, in many cases, I mean, I've never particularly found that language is a barrier, but I've always made as many strides as I could to learn the language myself. Unless I was staying somewhere for years, I didn't, the only language I became actually fluent in was Spanish. And that was because I spent a few years in South America. So had I spent a few years in, Thailand or wherever else, I would expect that I'd have properly learned the language as well. I also feel very blessed that English is my first language because it is also, the universal language. Yeah. So it has made it very easy for me to travel in that, if the person I'm trying to communicate with doesn't speak English, then probably someone else, in the vicinity does.
Yeah.
And also with tools like, Google Translate, and it's a lot easier to to get over language barriers than it ever has been.
Yeah. And like how many years you worked as a digital nomad and worked as a digital nomad in other countries? Like for how many years?
So I was as in I did not have a home, and everything I traveled with, like everything I owned fit into a bag for 12 years.
12 years.
Yeah. So I am still location independent, and then I can work from anywhere in the world that I want. The difference now, though, is I have a home base to return to. So when I travel, I don't bring everything I own with me anymore. That lamp would be kind of hard to fit into my luggage. So if we look at the conventional definition of digital nomad, I was a digital nomad for 12 years, and now I'm merely location independent.
Okay. So what are your like tips and suggestions? Like who are people like working full time in the jobs, in career in digital marketing or whatever the field be? So if you want to switch to digital nomad as an independent career, so what are your thoughts around this? Like, is this the right time to switch to digital nomad lifestyle, or what do you want to say?
So first of all, I want to say that being a digital nomad is not a career. It is a lifestyle. So you called it both. So I'll just kind of clear it up and say it is not a career. It is a lifestyle. And also I think that right now we have an interesting opportunity as the world, because of the pandemic. Around the world, organizations have been forced to go digital as much as possible. So a huge percent of the workforce is now working remotely, which means technically they have the ability to do their work from anywhere in the world. And going forward, even post-pandemic, I predict that a lot of these companies are going to reevaluate the real estate that they've been investing in terms of office space, and they're going to reevaluate the processes that they've been with their employees, and they're going to allow a huge percentage of employees to continue to work remotely, should they so desire. Now, so let's say that's 40% of the workforce that is able to work remotely now. Of that, some people will want to try traveling long term. So they may still keep their home base, but they may try, living somewhere else for a year. There's 16 countries now, maybe 17 countries offering digital nomad or remote work visas. And these are long-term visas that are meant to entice people who work remotely to come and stay in their country for up to a year. This is a trend. This is going to continue. Now, of that percentage of remote workers who have tried traveling long-term, perhaps some of them will then sell everything they own and become proverbially homeless, and then just keep traveling around the world as digital nomads. So I do think that this is a trend that will increase. It's not necessarily something that everybody's going to do, though, because it, like I said earlier, it does have a shelf life, in my experience.
Yeah, right. At times you will feel alone as well. There could be possibility.
Yeah, I think that's a function of working online as well. And it's a function of you can feel alone. You can be in a room full of strangers or a room full of friends and still feel alone. So that's a more esoteric process than I think we have time for today.
Right. So which place is less recommended for the first time travelers out of those 60 countries you have traveled so far? Which is like less
places that I would recommend to travel.
Which is the place you will not recommend?
They're interesting questions to ask. The problem is I'm not inclined to want to answer them because travel is contextual. So my experience of the world or of a country in the world and your experience will be two different things. When people ask me what my favorite country is, I don't want to answer the question because in my experience, my favorite countries have only a little bit to do with the actual country itself and much more to do with who I'm with, what I'm doing, and how I'm feeling.
Right.
So there are, and also what is your experience? What country are you from? What kind of things are you, what is your why for travel? Why are you traveling? All of these are factors that come into play that would then lead me to suggest that you do or don't visit any given location. So I'm going to be vague on that one. Sorry.
You will pass this.
Yes,
No.
pass.
Like I have a question about India. You have been to India 3 years back. So how's your stay in India? If you want to share any good or a bad thing, any good.
India is one of those countries that has a reputation for being an overwhelming experience. India is a country that has a reputation for, no matter how much travel experience you have, you will be surprised by India.
Yeah.
And I had been traveling full time for 10 years before I ever went to India. And I will agree that in ways that I had not predicted, it was overwhelming. It's also a really interesting place in that there's a sentiment out there that India anybody's experience of India is more a reflection of what's going on inside of
Right.
you
Yeah. Right.
than the place itself. And I would say that actually applies to travel in general. But for whatever reason, India really draws that out of people. And very unfortunately for me, I was not in a good place here when I visited India.
Okay.
So my trip to India started off with a bang. I took the Deccan Odyssey from Jaipur to Mumbai, which is, the Deccan Odyssey is one of the world's most luxurious trains. It was a sponsored experience that I was writing and doing videos about, and I loved it. It was fabulous. But even there on that train, because I was not I was basically burning out. I didn't realize it at the time, but I had reached a fundamental point of burnout, lifestyle burnout, as well as work and everything burnout. And my body started to fail me. So even there on that train, I was very ill. I had migraines. I was almost unable to function. And I couldn't even do audiences that I was supposed to do on the train because of it. And so that inspired me to, I realized I had to just slow down. So I went to Rishikesh because many people had told me that Rishikesh is a very spiritual destination.
Yoga capital.
Yoga, yeah. And I also had a friend who is a very famous India blogger, and she was telling me about Panchakarma. And she said, if you're not feeling right in terms of the body and whatnot, she said, do some Panchakarma. Now I know that South India is really where, Kerala is where you really, or not, maybe not Kerala, but South India in general is probably the birthplace of Panchakarma. But I did find a place in Rishikesh that came recommended to me. So I underwent 3 weeks of Panchakarma treatments in Rishikesh. But very unfortunately for me, through that time, by this point, I realized I was in trouble. I realized that I was very fundamentally burned out. My body was not functioning properly. My emotions were all over the place. I had too much work. I couldn't handle everything that was being thrown at me. And I was struggling even with my website. So that's what was going on inside. So of course that meant that my experience of India was not as good as it could have been. So it was difficult for me to be there. It was difficult for me to embrace everything that was there for me. So, which again is why, like I said earlier, it's, for some people, India is their absolute favorite country. And I wish that I had been in a place that could be something that I could say. But perhaps in another time, in another headspace, and having a different experience, I could be able to say that as well. So it was a rough go. It was really rough, but I'm very grateful for my experience because it made me realize and made me understand myself a lot better.
Yeah, maybe you can plan your second visit, like after this pandemic gets over and we are back in the new normal.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah, great. Can you share a few of your local experiences, like which really transformed your life during travel? There's so many. Travel is transformative. There's no doubt about that. And the things that I've learned along the way have been amazing. But probably some of the biggest learning experiences, or the most transformative experiences, were in the moment not good. Like they were not like. I survived 3 natural disasters. I've had 3 tropical diseases. I've survived more breakups than I would care to admit to. I've was in a near fatal accident. I've had a lot of things happen. Roller coaster kind of a journey.
Yeah, quite a journey. And it, in my experience, misadventures make for the best stories. So I've got a lot of really good stories. And through challenge comes growth. So if we're talking about transformation, some of these things that in the moment may have been some of my more difficult moments turned out in the end to be some of my most cathartic and transformative experiences.
Okay, great. So like how do you monetize right now? Like during this pandemic, you told us like your website traffic has slowed down. Like what are the things which are you able to monetize, or like you are running successfully business? Like how much your earnings have been affected right now?
My earnings have tanked. It was, like I said, in March, I lost 50% of my traffic, which means I lost more than 50% of my income because a lot of affiliate programs shut down entirely. So I lost that. And then in May, I lost another 50%. So overall, my income and my traffic and income went down about 75%, and it hasn't really recovered. It's maybe back down to 70% of its, of what it was in February. Okay. My sources of income are display advertising, affiliate ads, and a few sponsorships like newsletter sponsorships or placements. So it's all mostly traffic dependent. Oh, and book sales. I'm sorry, I've written a few books as well. So I have book sales as well. Okay. I actually, for 10 years, I published my annual income and my expenses as well. So you can kind of see what that journey has been like for me if you go to my website. So yeah, it's definitely suffered. I am still making enough to pay the bills, which is good. I'm very grateful for that. But I'm also looking at, I'm evaluating the industry and where I think it might be going post-pandemic. To what extent will my website recover? But also to how can I change? I think I'm ready for a change. I just don't know what that change is going to look like and how I will implement it. So hang on, let's see what happens.
So are you exploring any kind of new avenues for income streams in the past 8 to 9 months?
So since the pandemic started, I haven't really been exploring new income streams. For me, my strategy, a lot of people were immediately pivoting. They were like, oh, I'm going to do this because this is going to take advantage of the pandemic. And for me, I was just kind of in shock, to be honest. I was like, oh my God, what's happening? And I also believe that the state that we're in right now is not the state that we will always be in. That travel will recover. It's going to look different on the other side of this, but it will recover. And so too will my website traffic and income. All of that said, just before the pandemic started, what I was developing, what I was already changing, and I was developing more of a public speaking career. I mean, I had already spent a few years being flown around the world speaking at conferences that were mostly travel conferences or blogging conferences, and that was great. But I wanted to build that out. I wanted to do more speaking and to turn that into a career of its own. And then, of course, the pandemic happened, and live stages and conferences that's not happening. So yeah. So then I started to write a book because that was also on my list of things to do. And it was not a complete memoir, but it was a memoir about my experiences in Peru and Ecuador, or in Peru anyway. And that kind of got away from me as well, in that I'm not the only author, I'm sure, to experience, I was writing about some very difficult experiences. And, when you throw in isolation and the pandemic and then writing about difficult experiences, I realized, whoa, this is too much. I got to take a break. So I took a break from the book as well. And ultimately, instead of really pivoting and jumping into a new business or a new business opportunity, I've just been hanging back and waiting to see where the pieces are going to land. What are things going to look like after the pandemic? And then I'm looking at what the opportunities are going to be. Because I think that there are going to be a lot of opportunities that will present themselves, but have not yet. To my own fault, I've never been an early adopter. I may actually accidentally have been one of the first travel bloggers, but I'm not an early adopter. Like, that was an accident. So I'm not an early adopter, for better or worse. If a fashion trend comes along, I don't usually pick it up until it's actually gone out of style. It's like when the fashion trend has been around for a few years, then I suddenly look at it and go, oh, that looks kind of cool. I'll do that now. So this is kind of another expression of that. I just need to just hang on and wait and see what's going to happen.
Okay, okay. So what are your like travel plans? Do you have any kind of travel plans for next year in your mind, or any kind of a sponsorship or any event for next year plan, or everything is
No
paused?
travel plans.
No
Yeah,
plan.
no travel plans. I have places I'd like to go and things I'd like to do, but I always do. So it's a matter of I really think that the thing for me to do right now is just to wait and see,
Mhm.
and if anything, to just travel locally to experience more of Canada, which is an amazing country. You can spend a lifetime discovering Canada alone. So that'll be good for me for now.
Okay. And you have also crafted few courses as well. I've seen on your website. If you want to share a few insight about your courses available on your website.
I don't actually. Well, actually, that's not true. I do. I do have a course. It's free.
It's free.
It's an email. It's an email course
Okay.
on how to travel full time in a financially sustainable way. So it's over 2 weeks. You receive a series of emails that
Mhm.
introduce you to the concepts of financially sustainable travel and give you the tools
Mhm.
to develop your own lifestyle, should you want to. So
Okay.
that is available on my site, and you can sign up for that anywhere.
Okay, okay. So we are coming to end of our podcast. So if you want to give our audiences few tips, any safety tip or any travel tip, that would be quite helpful.
I think that there are there's so many tips. I guess my biggest tip is read my website, because on my website you'll
Everything
find
is there.
thousands of tips. Yeah, exactly. But really, if I were to boil it down to an overlying recommendation, it would be open, keep your eyes open, be impulsive, be courageous, and be vulnerable all at the same time. And in so doing, you will also experience the same reflected back at you. And connection is really one of the main reasons that I have traveled the world, and it's extremely rewarding.
Awesome, awesome. So thank you, Nora, for your kind time today and sparing few moments of your life to getting our podcast done. And I will like to end our podcast right now. And thanks everyone for watching this video. And I will give Nora thanks a lot for sparing time and giving all the best advices, tips, suggestion for all the digital nomads who are kindly curious to know like how to start a digital nomad lifestyle. And Nora really cleared our doubts as well today.
Thank you very much.
So it's me, Sumit, signing off. Wait for the next video. Till then, and do let me know in comment section if you have any questions for Nora as well. Nora will be happy to answer all your queries related to digital nomad lifestyle and how to pursue travel blogging and vlogging. So thank you guys.